We should get to live forever. Hello, this is a heavier video than usual. Content warnings for discussions of death, dying, illness, neurodivergence, suicidality and ideation of self-harm, anxiety, depression, and rejection-sensitive dysphoria. See? Heavy! I'm fine, by the way. This has just somehow become the most efficient way for me to organize these particular thoughts. Very unacademically, by the way. If you're considering or have considered suicide, hit up the National Suicide Hotline and or the Crisis Text Line. I have friends who work for both. They're very valuable resources and mostly volunteers. My best friend volunteers for crisis lines. I can't imagine doing that daily. You should stick around. You see, actually, in this essay, I will convince you that you should live forever if you want to, but that's later. This is the first video in a slightly new format I'm trying that I call audio essays, or more accurately than this one, more audio than video, but still technically video essays. Basically, less visual aid in this one for the purposes of saving time and energy, and also to avoid YouTube's draconian copyright robots that will debilitate my monetization and kill me with a real gun if I use footage from media that isn't mine. Oh, the trials of living in late capitalist cyberspace. You've heard it all before, I barely need to remind you. This is a weird first audio essay for me to make, because I'm not planning on referencing media that isn't mine much at all, as this is a much more existential, philosophical rant than anything else on this channel, and therefore it's probably not going to be a good gauge as to whether or not the algorithm is kinder to these kinds of videos or not. But I'm doing it anyway, because my life is my own and I do what I want with my limited time on Earth. Also, I'm probably completing my forthcoming long-ass Adventure Time video in a format closer to this one soon. Once Fiona and Cake ends and I can gather my thoughts on it so far are, good job! Another good cartoon to everybody who made it, thank you. So that'll be a good test that you hopefully won't have to wait long for. I've been taking too many naps. When I'm asleep, I'm basically dead to the world, and I don't want to be dead. It's literally my biggest fear. And unfortunately, I have finite time on Earth, so I should probably use it. Therefore, I've been taking too many naps. Wait, I believe we don't have a use inherently as humans except for those we make ourselves. I also believe rest, leisure, and forms of fun and play are radical acts in a world that demands literally endless time from us. Doesn't that mean I shouldn't believe there's such a thing as too much rest? Well, I don't think there's such a thing as too much rest, but I can still hear that voice in my head. I've been taking too many naps. You've been taking too many naps. Wait, is that a... I want to start whatever this is by talking about some of my favorite music. Chris Farren is a musician from Naples, Florida. He formed the successful indie rock band Fake Problems in the early 2000s before the band's eventual dissolution in 2014. Sometime later, Chris transitioned into a solo career, mostly producing his music alone with synths, drum machines, and his own guitar playing and instrumentation. Like many modern indie acts, especially in the power pop scene, Chris has always juxtaposed self-effacing lyrics atop generally upbeat instrumentals. A 2019 profile on MTV.com describes Farren's shtick as writing remarkably candid pop rock songs about self-loathing and depression, during which he ceaselessly refers to himself as a monumental failure. In a piece by Catherine Alvey for Punktastic, Chris describes this duality within himself. I think my vibe to the outside world is very glass half full, but I'm really fighting against a half glass empty mindset here. I want to present joy and carefree and fun, but I cannot help but have these dark thoughts. I'm wrestling with that in my life, and it translates into my art as well. It translates in that he ends up doing both simultaneously. It also translates into his stage persona and accompanying media during performances, also self-produced and catered, and also working with contrasts. See, there's another aspect to Chris's shtick. The MTV article characterizes his onstage and social media behavior succinctly as tremendously self-absorbed and ludicrously confident. After every set, he announces another perfect set by Chris Farren, with colorful letters projected behind him. On social media, he promotes virtually every show with a unique self-produced video of him green-screened against stock images of the city in question, in which he's always sure to call the city in question his favorite or the best city in the world. He has a whole album called Born Hot. Promotional material like tour flyers and billboards are always self-congratulatory. His most spectacular performance yet, and the city of Los Angeles congratulates Chris Farren on his beautiful new album. Everything he makes is saturated with himself to the point of absurdity, and yet the music always stays humble at least and self-despairing at most. The irony of all this should be pretty clear, but it goes further than you'd think. The choice to go solo is a common path for a member of a defunct rock band, but not an easy one by any means, especially for someone with a self-destructive mind. In the same MTV.com piece, Chris describes the prospect of going solo in hindsight. At the time, it felt like the worst thing that had ever happened to me, and now I'm so happy that it happened. It really made me examine myself and my desires in life and what's important to me, and all of that shit. And I think it really forced me to grow as a person and as an artist. Another quote reads, "Farren was so nervous about how people would react to his independent work that he decided to make his debut a Christmas album and donate all the money to charity in order to protect himself from negative criticism." So much of what Chris says and does can be interpreted as defense mechanisms. Irony is, after all, the ultimate rhetorical defense mechanism in many ways. In bad faith, this is used for evil. In good faith, it's used to deepen the meaning of Chris's art. And it's even helped ease Chris's real-life insecurities. As he became increasingly comfortable with the charming kitsch of a one-man band singing about crippling depression in front of a projector screen, the comically self-involved attitude began to emerge, the MTV article notes. He began feeling a renewed sense of purpose as a creator. Chris himself goes on to say, "I think that's also kind of a result or reaction of when you're a solo performer performing under your own name. When somebody says, 'Chris Farren sucks,' that's my name. That's like me. The only way I could feel comfortable doing it is if I was like, how can I make this entertaining for myself? Or so ridiculous that it's either definitely a joke or you can't tell what's real and what's fake." It's at once a response to real rock stars who humble brag their way to success while trying to deny their natural desire for attention and approval, and a way for Chris to fake it till you make it when it comes to self-assuredness. Honestly, pretty genius. I would try it out, but I don't think I could even fake it with a straight face. Not that doing so straight-facedly is even the point, in Chris's case, but still. Affecting confidence for the purposes of emotional shielding isn't Chris Farren's only shtick, though. There's another, often overlooked wrinkle to it. Another piece of Chris Farren lore. He literally can't die. There are two principal pieces of evidence supporting this. For one, his 2016 album entitled Can't Die. The title track proclaims it emphatically. Surely this is a metaphor for the sense of invincible feeling euphoria one gets from acknowledging their mistakes and flaws and choosing to live anyway, I thought at the time. Then I saw the music video for Antarctigo Vespucci's Freakin' You Out. For the uninitiated, Antarctigo Vespucci is a project Chris Farren started with former Bomb the Music Industry frontman and cool dude Jeff Rosenstock around the time they both began embarking on their own solo careers. All their albums rule, and you should listen to them. But this music video establishes that both Chris Farren and Jeff Rosenstock are immortal beings. The duo are celebrating their 100th anniversary, hanging clearly photoshopped photos of themselves from throughout the ages in a warehouse for people to peruse. It's a funny setup for a music video and works even without Chris's self-made lore, but I think given the fictional presence Chris already established, this detail deepens things. To me, it reads that Chris is so self-confident that he transcends life and death, or that Chris's immortality is why he's so confident. The stakes are just naturally much lower for him and he's got a different set of priorities. Or maybe it's all part of the act, and those pictures are photoshopped in-universe too. Maybe Chris is faking it till he makes it with immortality too. Maybe he thinks if he repeats it enough times, it'll become true. Either way, it's an entertaining shtick within a shtick, pretty informed by my own interpretations, though it may be, and it got me thinking about my relationship with life and death. Whoa, Tucker, that's a pretty big stretch to make. Buddy, I'm the same guy who said Bowser Jr. was the third Mario brother with his whole chest. Okay, that was at least 85% a joke. Or am I saying that to shield myself from criticism? I'll never tell. Thereby erecting another shield. Erecting. Anyway, I have a funny relationship with the prospect of death, because for someone who was suicidal for a brief but formative chunk of their adolescence, I sure am afraid to die. I actually bounced all the way to the other extreme. Instead of wanting death so as to escape the new and unpleasant emotions my brain was introducing itself to against my will, I became so fearful of and so repulsed by death that it started causing me problems. Let me explain. This bit is something I originally started writing for the recent Mario video. I cut it because the tonal whiplash was too severe even for me, and because I didn't want to center myself in my being wrong, even if it was simply being wrong about Mario. Above all else, I wanted to center the people who changed my mind about things, Sean chief among them. I feel like I've accomplished that, and now I thought it might be useful for some people to hear about something kind of profound that happened to me while I was internalizing everybody's comments on the original video and deciding what to do about them, when my pride was shot and my chips were down. Because I will admit, having my video credibly debunked out from under me did feel a little bad at first, as you might be able to imagine. More than anything, I was just embarrassed. I am embarrassed. I talked a big game, albeit in jest, about how I was such a Mario knower, and really I was just peddling conspiracies. It's like if I was a flat earth true believer, ride or die, and then someone proved me wrong and I believed them. As I described, it rocked my foundations of Mario knowing, some of which I had genuinely internalized into my personality for most of my life. And when I say all this, especially this next part, I don't want anybody to feel bad. had, especially Sean, or anyone who left a comment for that matter. You guys could not have been more constructive about his deconstruction. But there was this little voice in the back of my head that said, you made an incorrect YouTube video, which means you are incorrect, which means you should crawl into bed and never say anything to anyone ever again, lest you do it wrong too. And at this point in my life, I'm fortunate enough to know that that voice is wrong, that it's a symptom of insecurity and anxiety, and that I should treat it like what it is. A little Goomba in the ass crack of my brain who is more of a pest than he is reflective of any sort of value judgment on myself. He doesn't represent any sort of dark Freudian truism about me that says I'm bad, actually. He may bother me to some extent for the rest of my life, but he's not correct. I know that. I knew that. But he's still there, and he's loud enough to get my attention sometimes. And when, for just a fleeting moment, my gut reaction to being wrong about Mario was, you should shut up forever, the sheer disproportion of that reflex, brief as it was, to the circumstance that caused it, felt so familiar. It reminded me of something that's stuck with me for a really long time. The first time I remember having such a dip in my self-esteem that I ideated self-harm was in kindergarten. I wrote a poem about this for a collection I did a while back. It tells the story in less words, so I'll read it here now. Bell rings after kindergarten recess. I bring the dregs of playground conversation in with me as we sit down for story time, and sip from them a trifle too long. So Mrs. Sandberg sternly tells me, strike one. It is the first time I have been told to stop talking, and subsequently the first time I have wanted to die. Even then, I know the reaction is irrational, overblown, yet even then, my gifted kid gray matter screams disgrace before I know what it means, internalizes self-flagellation without a frame of reference to measure the punishment against. So green off the vine as to barely have surpassed seedling. I feel ruined, but I can't decide if it's from the infraction or the guilt I seem to have been unwillingly offered at birth. I learned that when the game gets hard, it is easier to turn it off than to leave the thing going, tempted to check out so that I might make myself a morsel for the improved, sinless incarnation of me to come. They will 100% the playthrough with no scolding, no faulty chemicals not yet identified. Too little to feel that much, that fast. Undead on arrival, forgive it at last. Even at the time, even with my before-then clean, good noodle record, I realized this was a disproportionate reaction to the cause. Even at the time, I realized the instinct to die wasn't something I really wanted at the core of me, but still, this reflex of shame. The way my child's brain with barely any external conditioning instinctively went, kill yourself, before I even knew how or why not. Being wrong about Mario did not make me want to kill myself, I want to be clear about that. But, like this moment from kindergarten, the sentence did not equal the crime. There was no crime. During the fallout of the Mario video, I reread this poem so I could try and really viscerally remember how it felt. I clocked it when I noticed I had used video game metaphors. I know what this is. That moment. This Goomba now. It's rejection-sensitive dysphoria. Having already made the Olympic-level intellectual leap from Mario to rejection-sensitive dysphoria and suicidal ideation, the legs of my brain still springy from the bound even months later, I just recently started linking these ideas to my relationship with death, because if the Goomba of rejection-sensitive dysphoria, or suicidal depressive catastrophization, or whatever you want to call it, has always existed in my mind, and if I've always been able to, on some level, identify that as an entity antithetical to my actual desires, what are my actual desires? Well, I haven't been truly suicidal since puberty, when I was really starting to become conscious of my anxiety/depression/ still vague to even me neurodivergence, and how it could alienate me from the world and happiness. But even then, I had this animal instinct to self-preserve, which I think makes sense. Evolutionarily, we generally try not to die, which is why suicidality is considered indicative of disorder or illness. Then, that instinct got amplified by anxiety and took on the latter condition's self-destructive qualities. Fuck! That sucks! See, basically since high school, my 180 bounce back from suicidality into illness anxiety had been bubbling. My gap year between high school and college was a time of even more sedentariness than usual, which made me hyper-aware of my body. I literally started listening to my heartbeat and going like, is this the right tempo? Which turned into, oh god, I have a heart condition, I better go to the doctor. Things like that happened until I settled into college, leaving me with many unnecessary doctor's appointments and therefore co-pays that I still haven't financially recovered from. Then there was a dry spell as I became too distracted by art school to think too hard about my body. But then, there was an experience I had in 2019 where they thought I might have lymphoma. They quickly discovered it was actually mono. It's pretty funny in hindsight, but at the time it sucked, as you could imagine. A year or so later, I made a comic about it called Node. It leans into the absurd humor of the American medical industry I was coming face to face with at the time, with not that much exaggeration at all, actually, and the horrible purgatorial dread state my brain was putting me in, and tries to convey them both, basically, as they happened. Visually, it hasn't aged great, but I like where I took it, and it was super cathartic magic to me. Check it out if you want. I promise this whole thing hasn't been an elaborate ad. If nothing else, all this suggests to me that, in spite of my broken brain, I must inherently want to live. And I do. I actually really do.
I'm not gonna live forever, Finn. I would if I could.
Atrocity Guide's video on the Immortalist group, The Eternal Flame. I love it! It's a classic! You should watch it if you haven't. To summarize, it's about a cult of folks who believe you can achieve immortality through willpower alone. But, I'm gonna say something kinda controversial, they kinda had a point. Not about the it's possible to surpass everything through sheer force of will part, mind you. We're all subject to systems and subjugation and brain chemistry that we can't just click our heels together and wish ourselves out of. I was subject to this belief a lot when I first started identifying my depression. Lots of, just be positive, just smile, and it's like, I can't barge my way through a brain that wants to eat me, you naive weirdos. No one can just barge their way into getting a job where the folks hiring are prejudiced against them, you know? No one can just barge their way through poverty or dysphoria, or, as much as the Eternal Flame would like to believe, the forces of nature. We have to be reasonably humble to those things or we'll fucking die. People's pursuit of immortality is literally killing the world, whether it's sci-fi delusions of space colonization and AI, or the working class being fodder for the rich to secure and hoard the most high-quality resources, security, healthcare, etc. Lots of people die, so a few people get to pursue living as long as they possibly can. We know this. But boy, do I wish we could be exempt from all that and still keep the health of our planet. There shouldn't be this many monkey's pawable scenarios in the world I want to live in, which I can best describe as quite anarchist. I'll say what I think. Time is a degenerative disease, and I want a cure. I want exemption. I want to live forever, baby! If I never died, I wouldn't have the inevitability of my death subtly, or unsubtly, informing every decision I make. I would be liberated so much from FOMO, fear of missing out, because while that particular opportunity that just passed is probably irreplicable, some are replicable. And I'll never really know anyway, so why not give myself the most amount of chances to watch the dice roll? The most being infinite, forever. I don't want to die, baby! I want to live literally forever. Hot take. I never want to die. This isn't an opinion, this is just called being a person, I think. But let me continue convincing you for a minute. I wouldn't have to make use of any of my time, for capital or otherwise, because I would have the gift of infinite time. Infinite personal projects, which God knows part of me is already acting like I can take on. Infinite mistakes, infinite chances, no stakes. I'm not gonna pretend like I've thought of every potential downside to immortality, but I've thought of a lot. That's the horrible superpower of having an anxiety disorder. And even after sifting through the ones I can chalk up to catastrophization, there are still a lot of bummers. Outliving everyone I loved would suck. So would seeing the heat death of the universe or whatever, I would assume. Don't condescend to me and think I haven't thought of these things. I just think that in that immortal scenario, I'd also have infinite time to emotionally process everything. I think the human spirit is pretty resilient, actually. I might hit some sort of mental threshold and just go crazy. In fact, knowing the general fragility of my brain, I'm sure I would. But at that point, I could just choose to die, in my scenario. That's what I'm proposing. That we should be able to live forever if we want, and stop if we're no longer having fun. And I did say we, by the way. Here's my official position, bombshell take. I think existing and having a life gives us the right to live forever if we want, and end it when we want to. Wait, should I feel entitled to life? That feels kinda entitled. Wait, did I just hear myself? Of course you're entitled to life! Especially if it's not draining anyone else's life, or some other ethereal finite resource that simply having an existence depletes. Could that exist? I guess, but we haven't found it yet, so fair's fair. It's not unfair to not want to die. Can we do that without depleting the lives of others or the planets? Doesn't seem like it, lest you become an Elon Musk or a Porky Minch. So I'm not exactly advocating for any specific direct action here, except I guess for the fact that you should feel entitled to your life and your right to continue it how you wish. And we should fight to make that world as pleasant and sustainable as possible, as if we really were expecting and trying to live there forever. Oh no! Was this stealthily a video essay about anarchist politics the whole time? A little! It ended up being a neat little parallel with my separate but related earnest belief that we should get to live forever, thank you very much. That's just serendipity, which we could have infinite of, as well as loss and sorrow and everything, but whatever. If we got to live forever. Well, that was that. I hope you enjoyed it. I suspect this one won't be everyone's cup of tea, but you know I'm just throwing spaghetti at the wall, generally in life, but especially on this here YouTube channel. I feel like you understand me on an existential level now, which is pretty cool. Vulnerability is cool, except when it comes to death. I'm not vulnerable to death. Death can fuck off. In my things to plug section, I think the video already covered that on its own, didn't it? If you like this, you'll probably like my comic Node, or maybe my 2 poetry zine things, or maybe nothing. I'm not you, and maybe I'm also not your taste. But hey, might as well give it a try try. After all, we have infinite time. Just kidding. The slow march of death still trudges toward me, just like it does for everyone else. Except for Chris Farren and Jeff Rosenstock, apparently. All music videos are canon to life. They're documentaries. Anyway, also subscribe to my Patreon if you want to see projects early and in progress. I post at least monthly, and there's always some weird new shit around the corner, I'm sure. And check out the Anarchy Funhouse. Okay, bye! Bye!